Hey guys, and welcome to another brand new video. In this video, we actually have some very interesting news to go and cover over here, where it does go to show that it looks like PlayStation and Sony are actually somehow losing consoles. And as well as kind of goes and does a little bit of a deeper dive into the really big, grandioso vibe of how some of these countries out here are essentially just getting so many random shipments with kind of almost like a weird internal mafia going on when it comes to consoles and reselling, that it's almost kind of hard to even find out and figure out where these consoles are even going, and some are actually kind of getting lost, analysts are getting kind of confused, and it almost kind of opens up to kind of a very intriguing story going on over here. So we're going to talk about this because every now and then we need a nice little ghost story when it comes to our consoles and everything else in between. As well, if you guys are brand new, make sure you guys are subscribed with the notifications on as well for the brand new PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, or $500 giveaway. You get to go pick and choose yourself. Use those Twitter and Twitch streams down below for the bonus entries. But as well, we also do have all the nice little Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals. We'll definitely be on the lookout these next few days for some more nice little snaggable deals. I'll link down below, and let's dive into the video. So as I mentioned, it kind of seems like PlayStation's actually kind of having some big accounting issues. It also kind of seems like some analysts and also these import specialists are assuming that there might be something more going on. And this is also in regards to China. Now, as you guys know, America, UK, etc. has had a pretty good influx of stock, with probably the highest amount of ratios of consoles being sold there. But obviously, consoles are worldwide in China, India, Japan, Australia, Canada, UK, Brazil, wherever it may be. And apparently, so this whole tracking process is a lot harder than we're kind of going and assuming. So we're going to talk about this over here from the good old GameIndustry.biz, why it's actually impossible pretty much to track console sales in China. So Sony says the PS5 has sold 670,000 units in mainland China, but consultants actually suggest its imports actually are likely putting it way more, to almost triple the amount at 1.5 million consoles as well. So earlier this year, Sony has announced it sold 670,000 PlayStation 5 units in mainland China, but the also install base is actually almost certainly a much higher. It's like individual video games, consoles must be approved for release in China with their kind of hardcore regulations. For decades, home consoles were actually banned in the region, but since 2015, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo have actually been able to release versions of their devices to one of the world's biggest game market, albeit often with restrictions on features and content. The 670,000 sales announced by Sony, originally announced during an investors briefing in May, and reiterated around the news that Sony is expanding its incubator for Chinese developers, which we covered up in a video about a week ago or so, will only encompass the official released model, interestingly enough. But the import scene in China means that the standard model of the PS5 is widely available in the country, purchasable via online marketplaces like Taobao and even gray market physical retail stores. So this is actually kind of a drama we've touched on before, where we've kind of seen a lot of different other regions such as United States, etc., big scalping groups that will be importing those consoles to places like China so they can actually go and sell them on a profit. So let's say scalping kind of dies down here in America and you get your console for $550 or whatever it may be. In China or other big areas think maybe Dubai, the demand is still really high, and some folks have enough money to be yeah, I'll drop $1,000, $1,500 in American USD to get my consoles. And you can kind of see over here where even their third-party sites such as Taobao and other gray market physical stores are still just scheming. They also have a quote saying, "It's simply too easy and convenient to buy an imported PS5 and then continue to buy imported games unrestricted." So in fact, the PS5 did not launch in China until 2021. 6 months after its international launch, meaning importers would have had their hands on the console before even Sony even recorded an official sale. And the Xbox Series X and S did not launch until June, so its total sales figures will be similarly affected. They're basically kind of losing the tracking of accounting for all of these consoles and kind of overly being done and overly being sold. The conundrum is in figuring out how many of these imported consoles are effectively sold in China. Sheshuan, a based games consultant, Daniel Camillo, tells GameIndustry.biz. The fact is, nobody knows exactly. The best we can do is guess and speculate, which is also kind of bad for American consumers or other region consumers, because it does seem like they're also exporting goods from those locations into places like mainland China. So Camillo previously wrote about the impact of imports on the Chinese launch of Nintendo Switch, and most imported consoles come from Japan. Hong Kong, and Taiwan, he says, but some also came from the United States and other regions, and so sales will be counted within those regions instead. So it's kind of like you buy it in the United States, it's going to be counted in the United States, even if it somehow ends up in China, and kind of has like that weird like flip-flops going around. So if Sony sells, say, 1 million units in Japan, we can be certain that a portion of these units are actually being redistributed to China to Chinese consumers, and ultimately do not reflect the real install base of consoles in Japan, Camillo explains. And this could have been a big problem we've kind of touched on before, and almost might become like the next big wave of issues, because as scalping becomes normally priced in places, let's say Japan, America, etc., that incentivizes these folks, like these big botting groups and scalping groups, to again still buy out as much stock as they can, and then pretty much taking that away from normal consumers. And while granted the stock situation is getting pretty good here in America, that doesn't mean that it can't always just be completely bought out in the near future, especially when restocks become a little bit more scarce after the holidays. So they say, how big is that portion? It's virtually impossible to know. The network of distributors and scalpers who divert shipments to China is too wide and diverse, and once the units land in China, they are sold through hundreds of different sellers across the country. There is all this time basically no tracking has been good, no method has basically been capable of tracking these, and just no one really knows what's happening to these consoles besides like say like you make a Chinese game and you realize that there's 800,000 people playing it, like unique viewers, unique players, and then they only sold 700,000 consoles, so you can kind of like assume, just based on player base, that something's a little bit messed up. But while it's impossible to know for certain, Camillo says that there are methods by which you can estimate how many imported units are sold in China through a combination of how many imported models are listed on online stores. So once again, it's kind of like you are only giving them 50,000 consoles and somehow there's 100,000, there's some tomfoolery about. Tracking price fluctuations too as well, which also kind of is like the usual supply and demand tracker. We kind of sometimes do that ourselves with other websites, and that kind of makes sense too, because if you see that there's a huge price decrease with kind of no thing outside of the norm, it's probably a reason why of consoles being flooded in the markets. And also obviously just from talking with sellers and being like, hey, how'd you get this console? What's going on? How do you get more? I need to get 5 for my buddies, wink, wink, and then getting information from them. So the constant feedback I get is that imported models vastly outsell the Chinese models. This is in spite of the price for imports being higher than the local ones. Based on this, Camillo estimates that imported consoles sell at least 3 times more units than the official China models, adding that he believes that at least 1.5 million PS5 units have been sold in mainland China across all models. Since launch, demand for the console in the country has been high, and the influx of stock has been almost constant, he explains, which doesn't make sense because we've also in America, with way more consoles, have had a lot of lulls in stock. While hard to be precise with the number, all signs indicate the total real amount of PS5 consoles in China to be considerably higher than even Sony can account for from its distributors and its licensed Chinese model. So once again, they're just losing consoles, and it's just big issues with botters and scalpers still. As for why Chinese gamers are more likely to buy an imported PS5 rather than the official model, especially for the higher price tag, we've actually talked about this before, or they just have a lot more, open-minded stuff. So Chinese gamers who are even just mildly well-informed know that officially licensed and/or distributed gaming hardware, software, and digital platform stores in China have their content and ability to run content limited by Chinese regulators and respective guidelines. So basically it means that China goes through a huge, big approval process to go and see what they have, what they don't have, and all of that. But they want to make sure it's following their rules to the T. And that's why people are willing to go and pay extra money on these different regions in, say in China, begin to get to American or Japanese console, because they want to be able to go play every single game out there. Or as well, sometimes China does not even approve certain games, so you want to obviously have a way to go get those and play those, etc., etc. So basically meaning everyone who buys these imported consoles can or will have a basically censored console, or they won't have these censored content, and also they're not losing the playability of their consoles. In the specific case of Chinese console models, limitations are usually found in their digital infrastructure too, with either online models being disabled for some games and or digital stores having a very reduced amount of games and services available when compared to international standards. So basically people just want to have access to all the games and they pay extra for it. Knowing this, many Chinese gamers will naturally lean towards imported consoles for both the PS5, but also other ones such as Nintendo Switch and the Xbox Series X and S, and it's just simply too easy and convenient for them to buy an imported one that also even some online sellers even have in stock, and they also just want to keep on buying these imported games, both physically or digitally, which is also unrestricted. Unless Chinese authorities decide to actively ban imported models and impose severe restrictions to its sellers, The local models will remain in a position where they are seen as too much of a compromise. They can't compete with better normal versions of themselves, which is also available to everyone. So very crazy to go and see this one. We've kind of touched on this topic before on the channel, but I just want to do a little bit more deeper dive over here as a good frame of reference. It's crazy to see this. So give me your thoughts and comments on the export problem that's still plaguing the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X's. And as well, make sure you guys are subscribed with the notifications on, as well for the brand new PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, or $500 giveaway, and the Twitter and Twitch stream down below for bonus entries, and all the Amazon links, Cyber Monday links, and Target links all down below.